All right, so I've been doing kind of a lot of serious contemplative videos about creativity and photography and things like that. So I wanted to do something a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more fun. And we're gonna discuss the age-old question of which is the better focal length, 35 millimeter or 50 millimeter. So unfortunately, my 50 millimeter is what I'm using to record this video, but I do have my 18 to 55 right here. Unfortunately, I don't have a fixed 35, which is definitely gonna be better. But what I'm gonna do is go outside and compare these two lenses. So I'm just gonna be shooting the same exact scenes, trying to capture the same subjects, but seeing which lens tells the story better, which lens can I use to tell the story in the most meaningful, impactful way. But before I get to the pictures and all that, a little bit of, I guess you could say, background on both of these. So I started out using this lens, the 18 to 55, and I think this is a, what is this? I think it's like a 3.5, something like that. But I started out using this lens when I first got my camera. It's the kit lens that comes with the T6. And I thought it was good. You know, I was taking decent photos, in my opinion. And I was just going around using it. I didn't even really think about other lenses that were out there. And then one day I literally, in my old, I think it was like my old apartment complex, I just found a 50 millimeter lying on the floor, and I didn't want to take it at first. I didn't know if it was anyone's, but it was just laying there for months and months, and I was like, okay, well, I might as well just pick it up. So I put it on my camera and I started shooting with it, and I realized, wow, this is way better. And that's when I started to get introduced to the concept of aperture and all those different photographic principles that I should have been paying attention to. I really wasn't paying attention to them with this lens. I was just putting it on manual, or not manual mode, on auto mode, or whatever it's called, and just snapping away, thinking that that was photography, which it definitely isn't. When I got the 50, I was able to tell stories. I was able to focus in on smaller aspects, get close-ups, and tell those little vignettes that are throughout a scene that you might not realize if you're, you know, shooting at, say, like a 35 or 24 or 18 millimeter focal length. So my development as a photographer continued with the 50 millimeter, but then as I got better, I started to realize people really liked the 35 focal length. People were a fan of it, even for portraits, landscapes. They just thought it was the most versatile. And I'm just sitting here with my 50 millimeter, like what are you guys talking about? Come on now. And so I wanted to make this video to truly put it to the test, because I've never really done this before. And I want to see if I can find a definitive result of which one is better. And honestly, I think it's going to be the 50 millimeter. I'm just going to put that out there right now. I haven't taken any pictures or anything, but I just think, for me, it's the best focal length. But I want to give this 35 a chance, and I want to see how good, you know, I can be with this lens, considering I pretty much use the 50 millimeter exclusively now. I don't really touch this lens very often. So I'm gonna dust it off, dust the cobwebs off it first of all, and then put these two to the test, and we're gonna see the results. So hopefully I learned something from this experience. Maybe I start to appreciate the 35 millimeter focal length a little bit more, maybe. But before we get into the pictures, one last important thing: make sure that you like the video if you haven't already, and make sure you subscribe to my channel if you enjoy this type of video and you enjoy this type of content. I'll be coming out with much more, hopefully, over the next few months, so stay tuned. All right, now let's get into the photos. Okay, so Dimitri from the future is going to be the one actually walking you through these photos. So let's get into them. So I think I'm going to start with the 50 millimeter photos first, because I prefer that lens anyway. So let's see what this first one is. Oh yeah, so this is just a regular black and white. I decided to use my shoes as the subject because I couldn't find any other interesting subjects, to be honest. I really would have preferred to use maybe like a model and do like some portraits and stuff like that, but just got to work with what you got in the current world. So I decided to use some shoes that had a good amount of color. Of course, you're not seeing it in this one because it's black and white. But what I was going for in this photo was just kind of like that old school, like thrown over the telephone wire, like shoe type of look. But I just had to do it like in the front of my house in my garden, so didn't have the same impact. Now we get to this one, just another plain black and white image, nothing too fancy here. I do love the way, kind of the composition and the way it sits on this porch light of mine. Just trying to be creative as much as possible in kind of like a boring, mundane situation. But with this one, we actually get some good color, and you can see that depth of field really come through with the 50 millimeter. I think I took this one maybe at like a 2.4, like a 2.2. Something like that. And I decided to put the shoes kind of lower, shoot from a lower angle. I kind of put this on almost like a hill, and it kind of makes the shoes a lot more impactful. It makes it look a lot more powerful, and of course shows off the gorgeous colors that the 50 millimeter can get with saturation and things like that. Then we get to this one, which actually I really like. This is probably my favorite of all the 50 millimeter photos, just because of the color, just because of the saturation. That's one of the reasons why I chose this shoe in particular when I could have just chose like, a pen or something random. It's a lot of good mixture right there. Then this one I think is when we get into the 35. No, this is still 50 millimeter actually. Just another basic shot to kind of show off some details on the back of the shoe. And then I think after this one, we actually get into the 35 millimeter photos, which I found something interesting. This 35 millimeter focal length, I'm not gonna lie to you, it's not bad. Like it definitely has some benefits. So let me see with this first. Okay, so this is just kind of like another black and white. I don't know why I was into black and white with these photos, but I decided to make a few of them. And this was more like a test shot, me just kind of warming up more than anything else. Nothing really interesting about this one. The composition is bad for one, and overall it's just not that great of a photo. But let's see what's coming up next. So we do get to one photo that when I took that photo, I kind of realized something interesting about the 35 and something that could be really useful for, especially for me. Just another basic photo. This is basically me trying to replicate what I did with the 50 millimeter when I just kind of put it in the those kind of red roses. But I wanted to put this in a different color. These are more like darker burgundy flowers I have outside my house, just to kind of see the color saturation. And it's a basic kit lens, so it's not going to be that good. And this picture just shows that basically. If I had maybe like a 35 millimeter 2.8, I don't know, Zeiss or something like that, it would be amazing. Okay. This is the photo I was talking about. So you see when you get closer with that 35 millimeter focal length, you have almost stretches out the subject and kind of distorts it a little bit. And of course that's because of the glass and that type of thing. But I love the way it makes things look close up when you get really close to them. And I think this could be really interesting for like a portrait situation when you're trying to elongate your model and make them look more powerful, make them look more impactful. That's one thing I think the 35 millimeter does really, really well that you can't really do with the 50. This is just another kind of basic photo, me testing out the color saturation. This one's a little bit better. I should have made this a little bit brighter, but is what it is. But yeah, that effect with the 35 millimeter, I think is pretty darn valuable. And it's actually something I want to mess with when I can, get out and shoot people more in like a controlled setting. This one, just testing out, just kind of testing out the 35 millimeter in like a basic sense. I took this one on a blacktop. I kind of wanted to see how it handled like some darker shadows and how that came out. The colors, kind of faded, kind of not that great. I can't expect it to be as good as the 50 millimeter, but with the 35, it's more like you have to kind of pick your spots. And then this is just another black and white. I actually kind of like this picture, the way I kind of composed it. The shadows were interesting. I think the light kind of has like a nice kind of fade off into the shadow and the blacks as you go from left to right. So I actually don't mind this one. But as I was saying, I think the key difference is it's just how you use it. You really just have to manipulate the 35 in a way that's more intentional, and you have to put it in situations to succeed, where I think the 50 millimeter is just so easy, at least for me. I can know that it's just basically a layup sometimes when I'm taking the photo, because I can just rely on that depth of field to make my subject stand out a little bit more. And of course the image is going to be super sharp, I already know. And also the color saturation is going to be great, but that's just the benefit of having better lenses. So with my 35, which is a kit lens 35, versus my 50 millimeter, I have to give it to the 50 millimeter. However, the 35 definitely has some aspects that make it valuable. So that's my final decision, more or less. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. Feel free to check me out on some of my other platforms. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.